Well, thank you, His Excellencies. And now, Excellencies, Ambassadors, distinguished guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen, we'll now proceed with the 16th South China Sea Conference with a very special keynote sessions. And for the keynote sessions, it is my honor to invite His Excellencies Ambassador Đặng Đình Quý, former Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, former Ambassador, Permanent Representative of Vietnam to the United Nations, and also former President of the DAV, to be the moderator of these special sessions. And may I also please welcome our two honorable keynote speakers on stage, the Honorable Ms. Catherine West, Member of Parliament, Minister for the Indo-Pacific, the United Kingdom, and Mr. Nicholas Kvanstrom, Managing Director for Asia-Pacific, European External Action Service. The floor is yours. And for our delegates, for our participants, don't forget that you can engage with our keynote speakers and our moderator during the Q&A sessions. On-site audience, feel free to raise your hand and wait for the moderators. And online audience, don't forget that you can put in the chat box on Zoom or in the comment sections on our YouTube and Facebook live stream feeds at any given moment. Your thoughts, your comments, and your questions. Thank you so much.
Welcome you to the very first section, keynote speakers. And we have four distinguished speakers in this section. First, we have His Excellency, Arto Reza Suryo Dipuro. Can you hear me, Pak Arto? Okay, good. Right. And the second keynote speaker, the Honorable Catherine West, Minister for the Indo-Pacific, Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, the UK. The third keynote speaker, the Honorable Tim Watt, Assistant Minister for Foreign Affairs, Australia, will be participate online. Hello? Honorable Tim Watt, can you hear me? Are you there? Not there, yeah. Okay. It is connected now, okay. And the last keynote speakers, Mr. Nicholas Kvanstrom, sorry. Okay, thank you very much. Managing Directors for Asia and Pacific, European External Action Service. So the rule of the game is that each speaker will have 10 minutes, and the clock will be counted down on the screen. Sorry about that, maybe. Then we have another 20 minutes for Q&As. So let me first invite His Excellency Arto Reza Suryo Dipuro. Floor is yours. 10 minutes, please.
Thank you. Am I audible over there?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Moderator, Your Excellency, Ambassador Đặng Đình Quý. And I'd like to recognize the Acting President of the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam, Dr. Pham Lan Dung, and the Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs of Vietnam, His Excellency Do Hung Viet, and also my good friend. Members of this panel, Minister Catherine West of the UK, Assistant Minister Tim Watts of Australia, and of course, Mr. Nicholas Kvanstrom, Managing Director for Asia Pacific of the EU. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor for me to participate in the 16th South China Sea International Conference. I would like to thank the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam for the invitation to join all of you this morning. I wish I could have been there in person, obviously, but circumstances have prevented me from doing so for now. The strategic significance of the South China Sea for global trade, security, and resource access is undeniable, and above all for the countries of the region. Yet tensions due to unresolved disputes over features, maritime entitlements, and resources are persisting, frequently resulting in incidents at sea involving various kinds of vessels, both armed and civilians. The intensification of geopolitical competition and the ongoing growing military presence and projections in the South China Sea significantly heightened the risk of misunderstanding and miscalculations. Misunderstanding and miscalculations, we have learned from history and current events, are the greatest challenge to peace and stability. In the face of these challenges, ASEAN's relevance and the effectiveness of the declaration of conduct of the parties in the South China Sea are being tested. Against this backdrop, I will highlight three key areas where ASEAN can play a decisive role. These three areas relate to ASEAN centrality, the COC consultations, and ideas for new modalities for predictable behavior, including by user states. First, ASEAN must maintain and strengthen its central role in managing the South China Sea disputes by developing unified concepts and addressing new and emerging challenges. At the end of last year, ASEAN foreign ministers issued a statement on maintaining and promoting stability in the maritime sphere in Southeast Asia. It reaffirmed ASEAN's shared responsibility in keeping peace in the region, emphasizing international law, particularly the 1982 UNCLOS, as the guiding framework. The statement reflected a shared understanding that the waters of Southeast Asia are interconnected, with the South China Sea at the center, critical and inseparable from the region's broader maritime sphere. And it also reflected the concern of ASEAN member states over the developments in the South China Sea and the need to restore and enhance mutual trust and confidence around the South China Sea. In this statement, ASEAN member states emphasized the importance of maintaining maritime stability in the region's waterways. Moving forward, a key part for strengthening maritime stability should involve deeper common understanding, first among ASEAN member states, of relevant provisions of the 1982 UNCLOS, such as those related to maritime zones and passages. Furthermore, ASEAN could lead in areas of practical cooperation in areas such as combating IUU fishing, tackling marine pollution, and the protection of critical infrastructure like submarine cables. These are urgent areas to ensure maritime stability as well. Another practical initiative that ASEAN could lead is to strengthen communication and mechanism between ASEAN member states and external actors. Direct line of communication at operational and political levels will be essential to avoid misunderstandings and manage incidents at sea. The second issue I'd like to mention and suggest here is how to add energy to the negotiations of the Code of Conduct. Since the commencement of the negotiations of the COC in 2018, progress remained slow. But although progress has remained slow, the commitment to concluding an effective and substantive code of conduct remains strong, despite ongoing dynamics in these waters. Last year, ASEAN and China agreed on the guidelines for accelerating the early conclusion of an effective and substantive code of conduct in the South China Sea. And ASEAN and China aspire to conclude the negotiations by 2026. This is less than 2 years away. The momentum needs to be strengthened to fulfill the 2026 aspiration. We should be able to begin political level discussions on the critical issues in the text. Without it, consensus on key provisions will likely remain elusive. Therefore, meeting frequency could be increased, especially at the senior officials level, and as requirement necessitates, even at the ministers level. This brings me to my third point, and that is ASEAN should not shy away from exploring other modalities with its partners to ensure predictable behaviors of user states. One approach could be to promote confidence-building measures within the framework of the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation in the South China Sea, the TAC. Through this treaty, we can create a framework that encourages mutual respect and non-aggression among relevant actors, contributing to greater predictability. ASEAN may explore confidence-building measures under the TAC to promote mutual respect and reduce the likelihood of such acts. Additionally, arms control initiatives could help de-escalate tensions, beginning with transparency and communication about military activities, and gradually build up to more meaningful management of arms and the naval buildup. We should aim for a comprehensive security for all and reduce security dilemma in the region. ASEAN, as an inclusive platform, is the right vehicle to achieve these endeavors. Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, the South China Sea remains a top priority for Indonesia. Indonesia is not a claimant state, but almost all access to and from the South China Sea passes through Indonesian straits. Indonesia is not a passive bystander in the South China Sea. ASEAN's strong and central role will be essential for ensuring that the South China Sea remains a sea of peace, stability, and prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Park Ato, for sharing with us your view on ASEAN's position on South China Sea and ASEAN efforts for peace, cooperation, and prosperity on the South China Sea. We thank you very much. The next speaker, I would like to invite the Honorable Catherine West. We have 10 minutes, please.
Oh, Sim Chow. Good morning, everybody. And it's lovely to be here on such a perfect morning with those beautiful mountains and sea in front of us. And as we've heard from Dr. Zung and from Vice Minister Viet, thank you to our local government partners who have put on such a beautiful event for us. And also thank you to our Indonesian collaborator who spoke first, which was so good to hear from him. In the UK, we have a relatively new government elected in July of this year, and many people have asked me, as the new Minister for the Indo-Pacific, how do we know that the UK is committed to the Indo-Pacific? And after 3 weeks, my boss, David Lammy, who is the Foreign Secretary, visited Vientiane as part of the ASEAN discussions. And this is my third country in the region to visit, just since July. So we know that working together with our European partners and with others in the region, we can be allies with all of the partners in the ASEAN, and we can join together to have a very good discussion about peace and security. After this conference, I will go to Manila, to the Women's Peace and Security Conference, which will, I think, create a really deep understanding for myself as a new minister as to the challenges in the region, and also the importance of promoting women's leadership around this area of partnerships rooted in respect and mutual trust, and positioning the UK as a long-term, reliable partner of the Indo-Pacific, underpinned by a shared respect for ASEAN leadership and centrality. And after that conference, I will return to the UK, bringing back news of this conference and your thoughts, because we know that after nearly 25 years of the landmark UN Security Council Resolution 1325, in which the UK played a leading role, I will underline that our commitment to advancing participation in conflict prevention, reduction and resolution is unwavering in ASEAN, but also globally. It's the same spirit that I join you here today to set out the UK's support for collective efforts to maintain security and uphold international law. Let me begin by stating unambiguously that the UK wants a free and open Indo-Pacific because, put simply, our collective global prosperity hinges on keeping the vital sea lanes in the South China Sea open, or the East Sea, as I believe in Vietnam you call it. Our shared security interests also demand that we stand up for principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity through the international legal framework that protects these principles. For example, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, as we call it. But it's not just the Indo-Pacific. Undermining international law in any situation, in any context, has the potential to corrode the wider system of global governance and protect security and prosperity. Take, for example, the Sustainable Development Goals. We can hardly hope to achieve these goals without peace and security, spurring on economic growth. And all of that relies heavily on having stable seas where the rule of law is upheld. This year, we've seen a serious and sustained series of incidents representing one of the sharpest spikes in tensions over recent years. The use of water cannons, blocking and ramming maneuvers have interfered with Philippine rights and freedom of navigation. These actions and the responses they may incite raise the risk of serious miscalculation, as well as posing a direct threat to international law. And last month, Chinese law enforcement attacked Vietnamese fishermen, leaving them seriously injured. The grave risk of instability and escalation that these incidents pose is a significant concern for the international community, not just because of the impact it could have on global prosperity and security, but also on livelihoods and local biodiversity. That's why the UK has and will continue to protest about any action which threatens peace and stability or seeks to undermine the primacy of UNCLOS. Keeping the South China Sea safe is our priority. And the only way we can achieve that is by working together with partners, including those represented here today. Now, another crucial element to our security and prosperity is climate and nature. And after today's session, I will be going to visit some of the areas affected by Typhoon Yagi so that I can understand more deeply how the Red Cross is working to mitigate those terrible floods and hear from local people as to how they're managing after those floods. We were among the first countries to sign the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Agreement, and we remain focused on the ratification. Home to over a third of the world's coral reefs, this region is critical to halting and reversing the loss of the natural ecosystem. Rising sea levels risk leading to worsening maritime disputes, and we cannot tackle the various risks unless we understand them well. So the UK is using its expertise to help. For example, the UK Met Office is studying how changes in sea surface temperature affect migratory fish and coastal ecosystems, playing a role not just on food security, but also on addressing the poor environmental impact of rising temperatures. Back home, we have also set a landmark goal to be the first major economy to deliver clean energy power by 2030. But acting alone is not a solution. That's why we want to work with you and partners across the world to accelerate the clean energy transition. We're boosting progress by building on existing programs. The Just Energy Transition Partnership, JET-P, in Indonesia and Vietnam, supporting innovative clean energy and the expansion of grids and storage. Technology also plays a key role, and something which the UK is keen to harness to help solve global challenges. Modern maritime ecosystems are becoming increasingly interconnected and digital in nature, and more sophisticated technology supports improved port operations across the globe. The development of autonomous surface ships will reduce the number of seafarers needed to operate a vessel. We know how essential undersea telecoms cables, which was mentioned by our Indonesian colleague earlier, are. They will only grow in importance with the use of artificial intelligence and become more widespread. That's why the UK is working transparently with partners to develop inclusive global norms and standards for the responsible and ethical use of technology and artificial intelligence, including in maritime contexts. Finally, we know that we live in a rapidly changing world where the more closely we work, the stronger we are. Next year, the UK will hold the 3rd Regional Maritime Security Symposium in Southeast Asia to discuss collaboration on a range of maritime issues. So encouraging to be here today and to work with Asia-Pacific partners. And as I speak, the HMS Spey and HMS Tamar, our 2 offshore patrol vessels, continue their operation in the Indo-Pacific, exercising with partners, responding to humanitarian disasters, and tackling maritime challenges. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today, and I look forward very much to questions afterwards. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Catherine, for sharing your assessment on the situation in ASEAN region, including recent development in the South China Sea, and sharing the UK policy, the engagement to the region, and also some of your suggestions on how we move forward for a peace, security, and prosperity of the ASEAN region, including the South China Sea region. Thank you very much. Yeah. The third speaker will participate online, the Honorable Tim Watts. Okay, Assistant Minister for Foreign Affairs, Australia.
Excellencies and distinguished delegates, thank you to the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam for inviting me to address you today.
Thank you to the Diplomatic Academy
Anyone who knows Vietnam knows that your institution has trained some of the best and brightest diplomats and leaders in Vietnam. Leaders like Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, Do Hong Viet, who I had the pleasure of meeting last year in Geneva, to name but one. So it's a privilege for me to be able to address you. May I first express Australia's deepest sympathies for the suffering endured by Vietnam's people during Typhoon Yagi. Australia is working in concert with local organisations to provide humanitarian relief, emergency supplies and other essential services. Now, turning to the topic of today's discussions. Australia supports a peaceful, stable and prosperous region in which international law is respected and adhered to, and waterways are open for trade. Australia believes we all benefit from a region that operates by agreed rules and norms. Rules we all had a say in shaping. These rules and norms are the foundation of our region's stability, security and prosperity. We support a region in which disputes, where they arise, are managed by dialogue and according to the rules, and not by force or raw power. But these rules and norms, including those on the peaceful resolution of disputes, are being challenged. We are witnessing maritime claims that are inconsistent with international law, particularly the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, the legal order for the oceans and seas. How we manage disputes matters for the peace and stability of our region and for the lives and livelihoods of its people. We are witnessing an increasing pattern of destabilising, dangerous and coercive actions at sea and in the air, and the militarisation of disputed features. Australia will continue through our words and our actions to support these rules and norms. This is why we strongly support the unanimous clear ruling of the 2016 Arbitral Tribunal in the South China Sea arbitration between the Philippines and China, which is final and binding on the parties. And why we will continue to voice our concerns about dangerous, aggressive and illegal actions in the South China Sea. We are also doing more with our partners. Australia is expanding our maritime cooperation in the region and, through this, our contribution to regional security and prosperity. It is vital states have the ability to manage their maritime domains. We will continue to work with the region to protect maritime and riverine resources and environments including through the mapping of coral reefs and work on enhancing maritime domain awareness. To shape and preserve the character of the region that we want, it is critical that we all play our part. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tim Watt. Mr. Tim Watt is not participated because, and he will not take any questions. Yet we see the video only. And now the floor is open for, oh, sorry. Sorry about that. Okay. So the last speaker, Nicholas, the floor is yours.
Does this work? Yeah, I was almost happy that we're going straight to questions here, but I'm not off the hook. Dear Vice Minister Viet, tack så mycket. I don't know if you know this about the Vice Minister, but he speaks beautiful Swedish. Good to see you again here. Pag Arto, good to see you as well. I wish you were here with us, but it's nice to see you on the screen nevertheless. Same goes for Honorable Tim Watts. Honorable Catherine West, good to see you here next to me. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's great to be back here in Halong. I think for me it's almost 25 years ago that I came here for the first time. Let's just say it's changed a lot. I've come over from Hanoi, where we had very, very positive discussions on how to deepen and broaden the partnership between the European Union and Vietnam. Let me begin also by thanking the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam for inviting me to speak to this distinguished audience on matters of such global importance. The issues on which we will touch during this conference go to the heart of global governance and the rule of law at the international level. And this is why the European Union is so engaged in these issues. Our shared security and prosperity are at stake. I would say that in fact, security between our two regions is more interlinked today than at any time since World War II. As illustrated by, for example, North Korea's support to Russia's illegal war of aggression against Ukraine, or the threat to maritime shipping in the Red Sea, to name just two concrete examples. Let me highlight two key reasons why what happens in the South China Sea, or the East Sea as it is called here, is so vital for the European Union. First, our economic health is directly at stake. Around a third of European Union maritime goods imports and a quarter of our exports go through the South China Sea. Disrupting the freedom of navigation affects global supply chains, trade routes, and access to key markets. It also affects the energy supply and our access to resources. And in short, it affects the entire global economy. Secondly, and crucially, this is about regional stability and security that affects international peace and security. Because we live in a geopolitically contested time. It's not just that disputed areas are more contested and more aggressively contested, but also that the norms and the very UN Charter and its principles are contested in both our regions. So this is about the health of our global governance system. We live in an age where we cannot afford to stand by while these essential mechanisms are discredited and undermined. We see the consequences in Russia's brutal war against Ukraine, but also, of course, in Gaza. If, for instance, we are to tackle the triple planetary crises of pollution, climate change, and biodiversity loss, we must have a functional and trusted global governance system. What happens in the South China Sea is a test of that system, hence our resolve to uphold it. And that's why we're so concerned to see the growing number of dangerous incidents taking place in the South China Sea, putting lives in danger and violating the freedom of navigation and overflight to which nations are entitled to under international law. The EU's position is one of principle, and it is crystal clear. International law, with the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, at its core, including the 2016 arbitral ruling, must govern maritime areas. Indeed, UNCLOS is our guiding compass. We condemn any unilateral actions that heighten tensions and undermine international law. Such dangerous actions, encompassing land reclamation and construction of military infrastructure in disputed areas, the use of maritime militias and provocative maneuvers in close proximity to other actors' assets, not only endanger maritime security, but also disrupt vital commercial traffic. So we're particularly concerned to observe a pattern of unjustified threatening actions, and we have spoken out on several occasions, particularly when Chinese actions have been escalating tensions and increased the danger. Most recently, in the case of an assault by Chinese law enforcement forces against Vietnamese fishermen and fishing vessels. As tensions escalate, we firmly believe that UNCLOS must serve as the compass, as I said, guiding us towards the peaceful resolution of disputes. The European Union calls for de-escalation of tensions and remains committed to supporting its partners and seeking to exercise their legitimate rights in the region and beyond. Another worrying area that was mentioned by Vice Minister Vietten is in fact a theme of a conference that we are all too familiar with in Europe, is disinformation and information manipulation. You called it, Vice Minister, I think, a narrative battle for the minds. And here we can share expertise and best practices. The EU is also convinced that mutually acceptable resolutions to these disputes can be found peacefully and through dialogue and diplomacy, bilaterally and also through multilateral platforms. Vietnam is showing us the way with the exclusive economic zone and continental shelf delimitation agreements reached with Indonesia and Malaysia, concluded in 2022, and with the increased contacts and cooperation between Vietnam and the Philippines that we have observed in recent months. We also stand firmly behind the ASEAN-led process working towards an effective, substantive, and legally binding code of conduct. The code must respect the interests of third parties, be in line with international law, especially UNCLOS, and continue to lasting regional peace and stability. Although, of course, we know that there's a lot of work still to be done, and that even if it were to be adopted, it may not solve all the problems. But ASEAN's role in addressing and resolving regional disputes is fundamental, and the EU is committed to working with ASEAN in the interest of peace and security in Southeast Asia. For the EU, as a leading regional organization, ASEAN is particularly central to our approach to the region. When we speak together, the European Union, ASEAN, as two leading regional organizations, we do so with great credibility, and we will be taken seriously. We in the EU are also intensifying our bilateral cooperation with ASEAN members to build resilience and strengthen Coast Guard capabilities. Our EU member states, we have 27 of them, are increasingly present through the deployment of naval assets to the region with regular port calls, conducting joint exercises with ASEAN members and other international partners. And we are also deepening our engagement with ASEAN through new maritime and cyber dialogues. For example, we're working with Vietnam and other like-minded partners in the context of the ASEAN Regional Forum to promote understanding of and respect for UNCLOS. I would say that the European Union offers something different and something unique to the region, because not only are we one of the top 3 economies and trading partners in the world alongside the United States and China, but we are one with no hidden agenda, one with significant expertise in maritime security, in conflict resolution, in tying this up with the global agenda, for example, through human security, which is a priority of ours. We saw it recently with Typhoon Yagi here in the region, how important that is as well. In ASEAN, we find an organization that shares some of our DNA in terms of being leading regional organizations, and we will work together to build peace and prosperity and overcoming historical rivalries through cooperation and dialogue. I want to say we also have, like the UK mentioned, we have a new set of leaders incoming in the European Union, and having sat down with my new boss, the new High Representative incoming for Foreign and Security Policy, Vice President Kaja Kallas, former Prime Minister of Estonia, I can tell you that the interest in this region is very, very high, and indeed in her mission letter from the President of the Commission, our Indo-Pacific strategy and deepening that and taking the work further is specifically highlighted. So let me close with a critical message that as a global community we face challenging times, and relying on international law and the international legal order gives us the support that we need to work together to find solutions. And in short, none of us can do this by ourselves, not even the mightiest, and I take that opportunity to say that might is not right, and that's why organizations like ours need to work hand in hand. So let's do that, come together in cooperation, supported by strong and healthy regional and international structures, on the basis of international law. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nicholas, for sharing the EU position and EU overview on the global situation, economic situation, security situation, and especially the EU position and principle on solving dispute, including dispute on the South China Sea, maritime dispute, and also the EU cooperation with ASEAN in the future on solving the problem. So now the floor is open. That we have a question from the floor here on site. And then also the question from online. You see the question on the screen. The first question appear to Catherine already. All right. So floor is open. We see the Castro. All right. Floor is yours. Turn on.
Okay. I'm addressing my question to Director Hisa Wodioro from Indonesia. Of course, when you talk about Chinese coercive action in the South China Sea, it's the Philippines that basically bearing the brunt. Of course, the attack on our Coast Guard vessel, the literally use of blockade to basically force us from Ayungin Shoal. It's the Philippines that, of course, has the greatest interest in having a code of conduct. From your perspective, sir, when do you think would the code of conduct be signed by both ASEAN and China? Does ASEAN have any timetable for the workable and code of conduct based on the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea?
Okay, thank you, the Castro. Yeah, I see the gentleman over there, right, on the left.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Pu Sotirak. I'm from Cambodia. July last year, China and ASEAN member states reached an agreement on the new guideline to accelerate the negotiation for binding COC on the South China Sea issues. I believe those guidelines reflects effort made to actively push forward for more speedy resolution. And I would like to seek some comment from His Excellency, some leader from Indonesia, particularly because I think he made 3 recommendations. But let me say that although there's a political willingness, but there is gap between China and ASEAN remain very visible in my view. I'm hoping that you can mention a little bit about those gaps, particularly the challenging aspect in the negotiating the text. What are some of those key elements that is a challenge? And the second point that I would like to seek your view is your third point about a new model, a new role of other user in the South China Sea. Can you elaborate a little bit more? This is very, very important because as you can hear the eminent speaker from European Union or from the UK, everybody want a stake. We did not hear the American, but pretty much they still want a free and open Indo-Pacific strategy. Can you say a little bit about this new role of other user of the South China Sea? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then we take one question online. You see the question there, okay. Park Ato, did you hear the question clearly? Yeah, I believe that the first 2 questions are directed to you. So floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the moderator and to the 2 questions. The code of conduct of the South China Sea, I think everybody agrees, has to be based on the 1982 UN Convention on Law of the Sea. So there is no dispute on that. It is among, if not the most strategic waterways in the world today, and therefore the rights of user states recognized under international law, and in particular 1982 UNCLOS, must be, and as far as Indonesia is concerned, will be part of the code of conduct. So I think that is, without a doubt, the position of all participants of the negotiations. Now, last year, ASEAN and China agreed to accelerate the negotiations and set an aspiration for conclusion in 2026. As it happens, because of the cycle of chairmanship, 2026 will also fall under the Philippine chairmanship of ASEAN. And I think we can fulfill that aspiration, but we need to also, on the part of ASEAN and China, invest more in the negotiation process. Because the way things are going, obviously, we need more energy into it. So the new guidelines would have to respect the rights and obligations of all coastal states and user states of the South China Sea. But in my earlier remarks, I also highlighted the importance of a number of other issues, such as the fact that all our waters in Southeast Asia are interconnected. It cannot be separated only by way of the labeling of these waters. They are all interconnected. So all ASEAN member states have an interest in the maintenance of maritime stability in Southeast Asia maritime sphere. Not all ASEAN member states are claimant states. So they are not part of the disputes over ownership of these features. But all have a common interest in the maintenance of maritime stability, because it will affect all ASEAN member states in one way or another. So we all have an interest in this. So there is ASEAN diversity, but there is also ASEAN unity. And I get the sense that all ASEAN member states have an interest and are keen to work together in promoting stability in the maritime sphere, including in the South China Sea. ASEAN itself is an inclusive platform. It does not exclude any country. The platform that it provides would include all stakeholders in the stability of this region. All countries, these countries are partners of ASEAN. And by having an inclusive platform, it is a platform to address the issue of security dilemma. We have to recognize the existence of a security dilemma, and we need to work together to achieve a comprehensive security that provides certainty for all. And I think ASEAN can do more in this regard. As at the outset, Deputy Foreign Minister Viet had also mentioned, ASEAN is trusted by all, and ASEAN has to be the bridge builder in this. So let me stop with those comments, and I look forward to further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. So Nicholas, you take. Oh no, the next question, and then you. Okay, Nicholas.
Do you want me to answer that one on screen, or which question?
It's up to you. You can take both questions at the same time. Fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me just very quickly to do 3 questions in a short time. I think on the question, I think it's mainly posed to the UK, but on the EU-UK cooperation in the region post-Brexit, I would only say this. By the way, I was very, very pleased to see the first statements by your new Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, to say that one of the key priorities was to reset EU-UK relations. And I think one thing that brings us together is security threats, whether it's in our own region or out here, and the threat to the rules-based order, so to say. And so on that, I think we find a lot of common ground, and we are, of course, key partners also in this region. On the EU, the question, I don't know if the audience can see it, but the question says, the EU can offer a unique approach by not having a hidden agenda. What does that mean? Can you elaborate? And I would say on that first of all, the European Union is a threat to no one. We don't have any form of expansive agenda in the region. We have no ambitions to expand ourselves territorial and so on. Secondly, we don't ask our partners to choose sides in some kind of new Cold War. Our approach is to work in partnership, based, however, of course, on the UN Charter. That's what we mean when we talk about a rules-based order, and things like UNCLOS. I also would say that the European Union is transparent to the point that I feel like I can't have a coffee conversation in my corridor in Brussels without Politico knowing about it the next day. The European Union ambitions are there for everyone to see, and it is based, we are essentially a peace project based on shared prosperity and shared security, and that's something that we want to bring to the region as well, and that's why we work with ASEAN. And then lastly, I think the question was on the link between the Indo-Pacific strategy and South China Sea, and I would just say this to be brief, that if you look at the EU Indo-Pacific strategy, you will find some very, very key strands that are pertinent to this region: connectivity, trade, and security. And our approach, again, is based on partnerships and on international law.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nicholas, and the floor is yours. Okay.
Hello.
It will now.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
I wanted to pick up the specific point about the European Union and the UK. Okay. We're developing currently a European Union United Kingdom Security Pact, which is the first introductory policy area where the UK wishes to work more closely with the European Union, and that, as my colleague has said, is mainly around European security. However, once our colleagues in defence are speaking with European counterparts, that provides a very good dialogue space for future conversations about other regions. The Prime Minister in the UK has appointed an envoy to Brussels to discuss trade, security, education, the creative sector, and a number of other areas where the UK would like to work much more closely with Europe. And that person, Nick Thomas-Symonds, is very senior in our own government, and he is has a lot of authority to begin discussions on a number of different areas. But as we always know, sometimes these discussions can take quite a long time, but they've certainly opened and they're going well. Just to give one example, Chair, the conflict in the Middle East, we had a joint envoy of David Lammy, our Foreign Secretary, and Stéphane Séjour from France to go to the Middle East together to talk about the importance of upholding international law, the importance of humanitarian aid, which is desperately needed in the region, and also to discuss what happens next, to try and get a discussion of a post-conflict arrangement for the parties so we can be partners for peace.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay. So now the second round of questions. I see the hand on my right, the lady over there. On the far right.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good day. My name is Alyssa and I'm from Malaysia. I would like to address my question to the Honorable Catherine West. Earlier speakers that mentioned norms are constantly evolving and that narrative plays an important role. So it's admirable that UK is also looking into the women, peace and security agenda. But current actions that we see, at least in the region, tends to focus women more, or even if you argue on the YPS, the Youth Peace and Security Agenda lens, to be more on the humanitarian aspect. So how can we better incorporate a security perspective, and if you can, to be technical as well, from the traditional and the non-traditional lens in our approach for South China Sea? Thank you.
Thanks very much. Next.
Hello. So I'm JP Sims, professor from Chile. So quick question also for Honorable Catherine West. You mentioned about the UK wants a free and open Indo-Pacific. Well, I'd like to know, what do you mean by that? Like, how does it look like to you, to the UK, to your European allies, and how does this vision differ from the American one, especially in light of the next American election? Thank you.
Okay, so once more for this round. Okay, would you stand up so every people can see you?
Okay.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Anissa. I'm from Indonesia. So my quick question is how environmental cooperation and then international development can decrease political tension in the South China Sea region. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, okay, so Catherine, would you start first? Okay.
I will. The question on the role of women and the narratives often being quite maybe male in a traditional way. I think what's important to remember is that wider definition of security, which is linked in with economy and the well-being of our societies based on the importance of free and open trade in this region is keeping our economies growing, and it's also attracting so much investment in this region, and that's part of the reason why we need to have the peace, so we can continue that important people-to-people dialogue, but also the importance of a growing economy, which provides then for more public services, education, improved health outcomes, and all those other positives that you have in a peaceful society. The other point I would make is, despite perhaps there being louder voices from men in the traditional defence sphere, in technology and artificial intelligence, in the UK, where we have a lot of women in this area working on technology, this is a much more shared space. And so I think it's very important to look at that wider definition of security around the technology, but also around trade, economy, and crucially around environment, because we have a lot of very important women's voices in the environment sphere as well, not least in the oceans and the importance of keeping the oceans temperature as low as possible, the impact that has on fishing, the impact it has on protein as a source of the importance of food security. So all of these different definitions of the wider definition of security very much play to strengths where women are in leadership roles across those different policy areas. The second point was relating to the role of the US. I'm not sure if we have other US partners here. I'm sure there's somebody here from the US who can answer that directly. With the election in under a month away, the important thing is that whatever the outcome of that election, that we work closely with US partners, that we keep everybody involved in the importance of a free and open Indo-Pacific, and that we all work together for that peaceful future with as much transparency as possible, but with all of the voices, whether they're small country voices or large country voices, but everybody has a role in upholding the rules and upholding the peace. And the final point was on international development. And I think I covered the point on international development and economies and the environment.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Do you want to add some more?
Just to answer quickly the question.
Okay, so the question I take online that, do you think having EU, UK ships in the region can be considered provocatives or add up to South China Sea tensions, hence affecting the regional stability that you said EU champions? Okay.
No, I think quite the opposite. I think navigating international waters under UNCLOS is something quite routine. If you have European Union member states' naval assets in the region, they are there in international waters or invited by close partners of ours. And I think by doing that, by accepting these invitations and showing up, we show a shared responsibility for not eroding international norms. I think it's as simple as that. I mean, I come originally from Sweden. I'm here representing the EU, but when we had in the Baltic Sea joint patrol by Russia and China, we were a little bit taken aback by seeing the Chinese there, not because seeing an Asian country in Europe, but they were, of course, there with a power that has an aggressive agenda in our region. I think that would be something perhaps a little different, but nevertheless, international waters are international waters. borders, as simple as that, whether it's in the Baltic Sea or in the South China Sea. Also, just on the cooperation question, because I think it's interesting also for the EU, how can we use cooperation to build security in the region? I think we do that by our partnerships for resilience. So we work together. For example, it could be Coast Guard capacity building, it could be disaster prevention efforts, and the European Union also has two programs, one called the SIWA, it's basically different security-related projects all over Asia, and one a maritime awareness system through a program called Crimario, where actually it's very popular in the region here and also in the Pacific to use it, for example, in Coast Guard or police or military for simply maritime awareness. So we build capacity, I think, through our cooperation, and that in turn strengthens security. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. We have time to take one last question. The lady in the middle.
Thank you very much. My name is Dewi Fortuna Anwar from Indonesia. I would like to address my questions to my colleague Pak Arto in Jakarta. Pak Arto, you mentioned about TAC, Treaty of Amity and Cooperation in Southeast Asia, where all of the ASEAN dialogue partners have already acceded to. And the TAC clearly stipulates that peaceful settlements of disputes, non-use of force, or the threat of force. Now, even without an early conclusion of the COC, how can we use, you mentioned about, applying the TAC into the wider region. There's no enforcement mechanism. Within ASEAN, it has worked perfectly so far, but clearly in the South China Sea, that is not the case. So how can ASEAN ensure that even before we conclude the COC, that we can in fact try to ensure that TAC is observed by all of our dialogue partners? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Parato, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Bu Dewi Fortuna Anwar. I wish I was there with you, but this is the second best that we are in touch online. And thank you for this important question. It's an issue that ASEAN itself had also been grappling with, in fact, since last year. So earlier this year, I think in July, but I may be corrected on the timing, ASEAN held a conference of the high contracting parties to the TAC at ambassadors level. It was a conference held in Jakarta. And then the next big event will be in 2026, when ASEAN celebrates the 50th year of the TAC. So within ASEAN itself, there is an intensifying discussion on how we can use the mechanism of the TAC for the region. Now, while saying that, I should also mention that there is an understanding in ASEAN, that when it comes to the norms of the TAC, it has global application. But when it comes to the how to initiate, for example, the existing mechanism of the TAC, the applicability is in the region. So there is that need for ASEAN itself to invest more in this process. We have started, and we have the 2026 celebration. So there will be a lot of work in between. Now, if I may also expand the issue broader, coming to application of rules, norms, and international law, including the 1982 UNCLOS. One of the reasons why the ASEAN-European Union collaboration is important is because when you come to the application of international law, rules, and norms, it's important to have common understanding on what they are. So, for example, the European Union waters, for example, in the Mediterranean Sea and South China Sea, these are maritime areas that are very strategic for global shipping, for the economic interest of many countries. It is important that we have a common understanding on application of these international rules. And that would include the respect for relevant provisions of UNCLOS. And I think that ASEAN and the EU can have more discussions on this, because respect of those rules and norms in one region would affect the respect of those rules and norms in the other region. So we need to work together on this. And I'm glad that Nicholas is also part of this conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. We see one more question on the screen, but we are 3 minutes behind the schedule. So let me close this section here. So please join me to thank all our excellent keynote speakers of this section. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now may I have the pleasure to invite His Excellencies Mr. Do Hung Viet, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Vietnam, Her Excellencies Ambassador Phạm Lan Dung, Acting President of the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam, as well as all of our respected Excellencies, Ambassadors, Head of Missions, all of our speakers and moderators today to join us on stage for the photo sessions. For our Excellencies, Ambassadors, and Head of Missions, please gather on the front line. And for our speakers and moderator, can I invite you to queue up on the second row on stage?